Move on to another question. This one from Adam Collins, please.
How can state schools be the same as private schools with half the funding and double the pupils?
How can state schools be the same as private schools with half the funding and double the pupils? It was Michael Gove who said you should be able to walk into a school and not be able to tell whether it was private or state. David Starkey.
Well, once upon a time, the sort of school that I went to, which was a local grammar school, was in many ways utterly indistinguishable from a middle-rank public school. I had the sort of education that boys, say, at Sedbergh up the road or Heversham down the road had. I had the same kind of extracurricular activities. I had the same sort of enthusiasm, occasionally wild eccentricity of staff. I had the same range of subjects. My school made absolutely no difference one way or another to my achievement or to how I was treated when I got to Oxbridge. The thing that has made this terrible divide in our education is the willful destruction of excellence in the state sector. That is what comprehensivisation did. It was done willfully. Some of the motives were good, many of them were absolutely foul. We willfully destroyed our best schools in the public sector, and we've been running behindhand ever since. That is what happened.
All right. George Galloway.
Well, if our state schools had the money, had the resources, had the playing fields that the private schools have, our state school playing fields are almost all now sold off by this government, which knows the price of everything and the value of nothing, then they would be, many of them would be the equal of private schools that we perversely call public schools in our language. I speak all the time at the very best of these private schools, where the cost to the parents is, in the case of Harrow, £32,000 a year, 35,000 I think now at Eton, and you can see that the parents are getting what they are paying for. They're not paying it for nothing. They have wonderful schools, wonderful teachers, wonderful facilities. And then I go back to Bradford with the third worst schools in the entire country, and I can see that we're not getting what we pay for. We are being starved of the resources and of the creativity from the centre, from the state, that would rescue these schools and rescue these children, who are, of course, the vast majority. So I'm very candid about this, although they might cancel my next invitation to Eton or Harrow. We should abolish public schools, starting with abolishing their charitable status. It's unbelievable that Eton is a charity, and if you give money to it, you get it deducted from your tax and charitable status. Start with abolishing.
You want to destroy our best schools all over again.
No, I want
the
to
same
ensure
idiot cycle of the
every
left.
child has the same right.
Ever learn.
Every child has the
These
same
were
right.
the mantra that were used. Look, you people never learn.
Well,
you're in a cycle of destruction.
What do you mean, you
all
people?
you can think
what do you mean,
is
you
destroying.
People?
You people like you.
My background
is what the word "you people" means. It means people like you. People who are full of sound and fury. You quoted Shakespeare.
Very furious.
Have sound and fury signifying nothing.
I'm absolutely furious because the children in my constituency are amongst the worst schools, amongst the worst schools in the country. And that means when they leave school, their life chances, unlike you, will not reach these Elysian fields of pop history and academia that you have reached. And I'm absolutely furious about it. And it's my job to sound off about it. And I'll tell you something for nothing. Every child has the same right to a good education.
Of course.
Unconnected to how much money their parents have got.
Okay. Alison, hold on a second. The woman there, you in the green. Yes.
The thing is that you're talking about getting rid of all the public school, the private school sector. So where do all those children go? They go into the state school sector, and then the classroom sizes go from 30 to 60. That's not going to improve the situation.
All right. Alison Wolfe, do you want to pick up that point?
I'm actually becoming something of an expert on this particular question because my university is
my university is setting up a state school.
We're setting up a specialist mathematics school for 16 to 19-year-olds, which will be funded as a state school. And, of course, the answer is that at one level you cannot do it with the same amount of money as other state schools. Of course, if you're a private school, you have more money to play with. And it seems to me that private schools are caught in an amenities arms race. You know, one of them has one covered swimming pool, so the next one has to have two covered swimming pools. But, you know, actually that isn't what schools are about, not ultimately. And can you run a really good school in the sense of it being a school of enormous academic quality on the level of funding that the modern state gives you? We believe you can. We believe that we can create a school which is just as good academically and in terms of encouraging the creativity and excitement that the best schools do with the sort of funding that we can get this.
So what's gone wrong in Bradford?
I think a lot of things have probably gone wrong in Bradford, but I suspect that one of the major things that has happened in Bradford is that very few good teachers have stayed in Bradford. And one of the things that I do believe that both, actually, the previous Labour government, which started academies, and this government, which has encouraged academies and free schools, has done, is actually to make it much easier to release creativity and enthusiasm and energy from teachers. Because, actually, you get a good school when you have a group of staff who give themselves day and night to it because they're excited about it, because it's their school and they can do something wonderful with it.
But on the present funding, that's the point.
Yes, on the
David Starkey pointed out
the present funding, it will not be eaten, but can you produce a really good school on the current funding? Yes, you can.
You, sir, over there in the check shirt.
Yeah, I think it's a bit unfair to automatically assume because it's a state school, it's not a good school. There are lots of good schools. I'm a teacher myself, and there are lots of very good teachers in the school that I teach at. And just because you're in a private school doesn't mean the teachers are any better, but it just means they've got a lot of better facilities, they've got smaller class sizes. It makes it a lot easier to be good at teaching. But it doesn't mean that they are better teachers. If you put a state school teacher in that situation...
What's behind your question, though, the original question about what Michael Gove said?
I think you can't... It's very hard to compare when it's not on an even playing field. You can't say to a school where you've got students paying £30,000 a year when they've got facilities out of this world and try and compare it to a school where they might have one football pitch and only have maybe a couple of hard courts. I mean... It's not the same. You can't compare the two.
Sorry, but there's just one second.
Is his aspiration... I'll bring in. Is his aspiration that you shouldn't be able to tell the right aspiration for a Secretary of State for Education, or is it a fatuous remark?
At the moment, it's factual. You can't compare the two in the sense of funding and facilities. I would love to be able to have the same facilities that private schools have, but if that's the case, then maybe Mr Gove will give us some more money. He'll make us have bigger, less class sizes, and maybe give us even more holiday.
Very briefly, David Starkey, and then comes
I think I agree with a lot of what you said. You've left out one absolutely central question, and so I'm afraid, as expert Alison, the key thing about public schools is the implied contract between the parent, the teacher, and the pupil. In other words, those pupils are there and they will learn, and there are virtually no disciplinary problems. My experience on Jamie's Dream School...
They do a lot of caning, don't they?
No, which some of you may... Hardly any. It's been abandoned. My experience on Jamie's Dream School makes completely clear to me that the key issue is that of discipline. This is what Michael Wilshire has been on about. This is
and that you mustn't insult the pupils, if I remember rightly.
You mustn't consult the pupils.
No, insult the pupils. I said not consult.
Did you say assault? On the contrary,
you shouldn't insult them, assault them, or...
on the contrary, good teachers insult their pupils the whole of the time in a good, sensible and joshing relationship.
So telling one he was too fat...
It's absolutely true, because he'd been thoroughly abusive to somebody else.
OK, I don't want to go down that road any further than that.
Well, then you shouldn't go down there in the first place. That's bad chairmanship.
Matthew Hancock.
I agree.
Straying from the subject.
I agree very strongly with the gentleman who just spoke, that it's a vision, obviously not a reality now. And the reason that this is a goal towards which we should march is because it's possible, it's doable to have very high standards in the state sector, even though, obviously, cash is much, much tighter. And we know that even with tight cash, you can dramatically improve standards because it's happened, and it's happened over the last 5 or 10 years. I'd pay tribute to some of the Labour ministers, especially Andrew Adonis, who started this programme, this Academies programme, because some of the schools in the worst areas of London are now some of the best schools in the country, and this is now increasingly happening across the country. But there's one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, which is a core driver of how this happens, and that is expectations. These schools that have really improved set very high expectations for every child to reach their potential. Even if they're not naturally gifted, even if they've had a difficult time so far, you set high standards and high expectations, and then you challenge children to get to those expectations. And boy, have we discovered through trial and error of the last decade or so that if you set high expectations for children, more likely than not, they reach them. And I care passionately about doing that in the state sector, and I would love Michael Gove's vision to become a reality, but there is a huge, huge gulf that we've got to get over. But can we move in that direction? Absolutely, yes, we can.
What do you... What's your view of George Galloway's suggestion that, for a start, you might cut the charitable status of places like Eton or Harrow or whatever?
Well, you don't, as a country, cut your nose off to spite your face.
That's what you think it would be?
I think there's two reasons that it would be a disaster. The first is, as the lady said, you'd end up with more people in the state sector, and we don't have much cash in the state sector, and so it would be spread more thinly.
We've got lots of cash.
But the other reason,
how we're spending.
No, we don't. We're borrowing £100 billion a year still as a country.
But the second wars,
reason,
cash for nuclear weapons, cash for banks, cash for bankers' bonuses. We've got cash for tax cuts for the richest people in the country. There's lots of cash. But you're giving it away to your pals, your fellow public school boys and girls. That's what you're doing with the cash.
All right. The man up there in the centre, and I'll come to you, Tessa, with the spectacles in the back row, please. You say it. No, yes. You haven't got spectacles on, that's my bad eyesight. You, sir.
Frequently the debate is more dragged to bring the top down rather than bring the lower schools back up to where we want to be. We shouldn't be tearing down the top layer. We should be bringing the lower layer back up to the better ground.
And the person over there on the right, in the back row on the right there.
Surely private schools will always want to be better than public schools, so it will always be a tit for tat if public schools...
Great, then they'd all get better.
Tessa Jowell.
No, they won't, because you'll spend more money. Public schools, more money will go into public schools. Surely that'll be a waste of money.
Tessa Jowell.
You see, I think this question touches on a whole number of issues. First of all, it is absolutely not the case that all public schools, all independent schools are better than state schools. There are fantastic state schools in which brilliant teachers, dedicated teachers, are teaching up and down the country, across London, in my own constituency, and I think that this is, first of all, an argument that we should reject, that state means inferior in every case to private school. I mean, I think the argument tends to be dominated by 4 or 5 very famous, high-achieving, highly selective private schools that tend to dominate the entrance to Oxford and Cambridge. What is it that makes a good school? It's a combination of things. It's excellent leadership by a motivated and brilliant head. It's also dedicated staff. It's engaged parents. But the other thing is, and I think this is a really important thing, is, you know, children go to school to learn so that they're informed, they're competent and so forth. But the diversity of state schools is what is teaching children to be citizens of the modern world. And that's what I think is so important and so incredibly uplifting about a lot of our primary schools and a lot of our secondary schools. Of course, we've got to do better and do more. And the ambition, in a way, never stops, because there are more children from disadvantaged, poor families,
yes,
unmotivated
but what
families
did you make of
in state schools.
What did you make of Michael Gove's comparison of the state and private system as having a Berlin Wall between them, which he wanted to knock down?
Well, you know, I mean, I happen to represent a constituency where there are a large number of independent schools and there are a large number of increasingly successful state schools.
So you think the comparison is wrong?
I think
making a dichotomy of that kind.
But also, I think this assumption that you walk into an independent school and you find excellence, and you walk into a state school and find mediocrity, is deeply insulting and untrue.
All right. You, sir.
There will always be a difference between private schools and state schools. The cultures are different. But I agree from the point of view, I think Michael Gove's point was, he's trying to say that the gap in standards can be closed. I mean, one of the examples he gave was a longer school day, which is what they do in the private schools. Extracurricular activities, help with homework and stuff like that, which would help people from poorer backgrounds. And also discipline. David Starkey mentioned that. It's a huge thing that needs to be migrated from the private to the state school more, where there is a gap.
Thank you. Right, now we're going to go on.